Hey everyone, welcome back to Beyond the Bar podcast. I'm your host, Denisa Tova, and today I have with me a matrimonial family law attorney, Rosalia Baiamonte. She's a partner at Gassman Baiamonte Gruner, a law firm located in Garden City, New York. And Rosalia has such an interesting story. Her story from her journey really began in Sicily, all the way to New York, and it really shaped her into not just being a top notch attorney, but a multifaceted individual with such rich and diverse experiences. And not only she's a whiz in the legal world, but also culinary genius in the kitchen. And let me tell you, she's a one tough cookie. She has some pretty incredible stories to share. And I cannot wait to dive in. Welcome to the show, Rosalia.
Thank you, Denisa. That was a really lovely and warm introduction. Thank you so much.
Let's start from the beginning. You've come a long way from Sicily to being a top attorney in New York. Take us through this incredible journey, and what were some of the key moments that led you to becoming an attorney?
So many people know that I was born in Palermo, in Sicily, which is the island off the boot of the southern Italy. And at around the age of 5, my parents made the decision to move their family, which consisted of myself and my older sister at the time, to the United States of America, specifically New York, for the opportunity to raise their family a little bit differently than was available in Sicily in the early 1970s. And so we originally landed in Canarsie, Brooklyn, which was a predominantly Italian neighborhood, and then eventually to Lefferts Boulevard, South Ozone Park, and then eventually Bayside, which is where I live even still currently. So I came
Wow.
to this country at the age of 5. We came via Alitalia Airlines, and I recall with distinct clarity even getting um, I've always been I always get motion sickness from an early age, and I remember even getting sick on the plane, which
Oh,
did not
wow.
deter me from my experience.
No.
But in any event, we came to this country in September. It was the beginning of kindergarten, what would have been kindergarten for me,
Yeah.
and I knew no one. I mean, we didn't know anyone. I didn't speak the language, obviously. It was a completely new experience for all of us. It was a new and challenging experience for my parents who didn't speak English, for
Mm.
my parents who had no family connections here in the United States. Um, for myself, for my older sis, I mean, every one of us in my family was made to confront a different type of challenge. My sister and I,
Mm.
of course, had the language barrier, which was very difficult when we were thrown into school. Um, Kids can be very cruel, as I'm
Yeah.
sure you know. And thankfully, we didn't have social media back then, but kids were very cruel and they
Yeah.
teased me mercilessly because I could not communicate with them. I can't say I was ever really shy because I'm not a shy person by nature, but I was very reserved because I was not able to express myself, which was a tremendous source of frustration for me. Um, People thought it was funny to make fun of my clothes, make fun of my lunch. Um, I took public transportation back and forth to school. Sometimes people misdirected me to the wrong bus. They thought that was
Mm.
funny. I mean, there were, you know, I don't recall ever really having, I would say, even a close friend in school until probably, I would say, the 3rd grade. So
Yeah.
I just recall a lot of loneliness. Being an immigrant, um, my parents didn't have money to give us private lessons. And so my sister had lessons at school because she was older than I was. So I was relegated to watching television to learn a borrowed television, by the way. I was relegated to watching TV, and that's what I would do. I would watch Channel 13. Even to this day, I'm a big believer in public television. And I would sit down and I would watch a lot of child friendly shows that were on back then: Sesame Street, The Electric Company, The Magic Garden. And I would sit there transfixed and I would mimic the words that were spoken in the way that they were spoken, which is why I believe I learned how to speak American English without an accent because I was projecting what I was hearing from public television. And that's basically my journey to the United States. Being a child, being an immigrant, having the difficulty of language and being the subject of teasing, I internalized it. And it was something that I felt very strongly, even as a child, that I had this feeling that I needed to overcome, that I could not rely on anyone. I needed to do it for me. And I think that there was, that seed of resilience that began very early on. I have always been a big believer in being very self sufficient, very independent, very expressive, because once I learned the language, Denisa, there was no stopping me. I mean, once I could master the English language and I could communicate with people, and I no longer had that language barrier, then I felt free. It was a freedom. I mean, I could actually taste it. It was
Wow.
just very liberating for me to find my voice. I know that nowadays a lot of people speak metaphorically about finding your voice and finding your
Yeah.
agency, but for me, it was quite literally a very personal experience. And I also think that that was the inspiration for me to become an attorney ultimately, to allow other people to who could not find their voice to
Mm.
provide one for them and to represent them. I think that was definitely tied in to my desire to be an attorney because it's honestly the only thing I can ever recall ever wanting to be, um, even from an early age. And that's basically my story in a nutshell.
Wow. That is such a powerful story, and I loved how you went all the way to the beginning and had such a clarity, um, what it felt like, being bullied essentially as a young child. And yes, I can relate. I came to this country. I was about 15, 16, didn't speak the language. And just like you, I watched many shows and I maybe my accent does show up here and there, but that's why I was able to eliminate. But I didn't feel like I belonged. So it's not a good feeling, and it stays with you. And
Right.
that same thing. I mean, I was my grandmother was one of 18 siblings back in former Czechoslovakia. So we were raised to be very independent, stand on your own. So even coming to a foreign country, I sort of
Mhm.
brought that with me. So it's wonderful that you go all the way back and could trace the sort of the origin of your drive to then pass that on to in your career, to other people, to your
Right.
clients. You didn't go back to the time in college when you made a decision to become an attorney. So I really do appreciate that. How do you think? Because I know you are a mom. How do you think that has impacted your parenting style?
I think that's a really interesting question because people would not think this about me. I don't think people who know me in my professional world. I'm actually quite domestic when I'm not wearing my attorney hat. And that's certainly part of my upbringing. As a child of immigrants and being an immigrant myself, even though we were physically residing in a new country, I was still raised with the culture of my original country. I was still raised to be an Italian daughter in an Italian family, having the expectations of an Italian woman. I still had that growing up. And so
Mm,
I learned,
yeah.
all of the, for better or for worse, I learned all of the domestics that needed to be done. I can launder and iron like nobody's business. And I learned how to cook from a very young age. I don't recall a time that I wasn't ever helping my mother in the kitchen. And so I learned how to cook at a very young age. And I would often start with cooking meals for my younger brother, who was the only member of my immediate family to actually be a natural born citizen. He was born in the United States 6 years uh, after me. He's 6 years younger than I am. So I remember cooking for him and making his lunch and helping him with his homework. And, just I think I have that duality in me where I do have that very strong domestic side. I love the nesting part of being a mom. And as an Italian mother, I'm sure you've seen it in television shows and all, but I can only speak as an Italian mother. I'm very attached to my Italian sons, and I have deep, deep love for them and the home that we've created together with my husband. And I love to be home
Mm,
because I'm at work. I have so many bar obligations and responsibilities with all
yes.
the other work that I do that when I'm home, it's such a joyous place for me to be. It's where I can let go of all of the professional, um, constant striving for excellence and just be me, just cook, wake up at 5 o'clock in the morning, which I do very often on the weekends, and just cook, just bake, just create, just enjoy. And I love it. And I think that definitely has impacted my sense of parenting, being a mom, being a what I think is a well-rounded person. I that's for me at least. That's been my experience.
It is wonderful to hear because there almost seems to be like a little bit of an extreme, women who are very independent and they do not often talk about that side, the nurturing side. Not that they're not nurturing parents, but I guess you call it a very domestic, and really finding enjoyment and just being present and cooking and creating culinary wonders. And I can relate to it a little bit. It we talked about it. It brings a sense of comfort, and maybe
Absolutely.
during the tough times, right, when faced with uncertainty, at least for me, it brought a sense of comfort. And it's interesting. Now, going back to the tough times, I mean, it didn't end for you just being bullied. You went through some pretty harrowing experiences as a young child that I believe impact how you feel about Halloween today.
Yes, actually, this story is not one that I speak about often, just because it has a it, it's a dark memory for me, but I don't mind
Mm,
talking about it. So when we first came to this country, like I had mentioned, it was September, and October is Halloween. And the following month, so I was only in the country for, about 30 days. For those of
mm.
you who don't know, for your viewers, we don't have Halloween in Italy. We don't celebrate Halloween. So it was not a holiday I was familiar with. It was not a custom I was familiar with. But my a cousin of ours that lived close by. I did have a first cousin that lived close by. She was my sister's age. So I was 5, she was 8, as was my
Okay.
sister. And she wanted us to experience Halloween being in the country for the first time. And I don't recall if I wore a costume or if I wore anything other than I don't recall that part of it, but I do recall that as we were walking, a man drove up to the 3 of us and came out of his car, and what I think he was doing, because I didn't quite understand, as I said, I didn't quite understand English. He was gesturing to his car, indicating that he had candy in the car and that we should go in the car to get candy. My cousin, who did speak English fluently because she was born in the country,
Mm.
she ran away. And then my sister followed suit and also ran off. And I was left there. And before I knew it, he had swooped me up and placed me in his car. And but for the fact that we did not have power windows and power door locks back then, thankfully, blessedly, I did manage to I guess, lift the lock up, that push button
Yeah.
lock. I did lift it up
Mm.
and get out of the car in the time that it took him to walk around the car and sit himself in the driver's seat. And I ran away, and I knew instinctively that if I had not done that, I would have been in grave danger. And so to this day,
Oh,
it is a memory that is with me every Halloween. I don't like the holiday. I've never personally really liked it, but it never stopped me from allowing my children to celebrate the holiday. I did not share this story with them until they were probably over the age of 16. I didn't want to muddy it up for
mm.
them, give them vicariously a bad experience about it, or make them feel badly for me. Both my sons are very compassionate children, and I kept that.
Yeah.
I kept that so as not to ruin their experience. But yes, that did happen, and it is something that I am reminded of every Halloween.
I have chills. I, when you shared it with me over the phone, I felt it then, and I feel it again now. I just lost little girl, not understanding the language. It must have been so frightening. But you really are the epitome of resilience, and I would imagine that you probably at the same time have no patience for just nonsense. I mean, as a matter of fact, what would you say is one of your pet peeves, to see maybe if I'm close?
So I'm actually a fairly patient person. It takes I think it takes a while for me to go from 0 to 100. I'm a fairly patient person, but I, I of course, as everybody does, I do have a pet peeve, and my pet peeve is it's that it's that combination of ignorance or incompetence with arrogance.
Mm.
That is a pet peeve of mine. That is, I have a hard time when I encounter um, incompetence mixed with arrogance. That I would have to say is a work in progress for me to deal with that.
That's a tough one. I'm
Yeah.
just trying
You know
to
why? I
put
think it's
myself there.
because I think Denisa, and I don't think I've ever even had this thought crystallize in my head until you've just talked about it right now. But I think it must be that I I am a I am very aware of my background and the background of many people like me who have overcome, who have done with less to be where they are now. And so I guess that I I have I have certain standards that I have imposed on myself,
Mm,
to drive for excellence, particularly in that winning combination of being an immigrant and being a woman. You
yeah.
always have this sense of having to be the best at something or having to excel at something. I couldn't just study to pass. I had to study to get the perfect score. I had to study to get the A. I never took a course in college pass fail because I didn't know how to do that. I've always put pushed myself to do more, to, be involved in every organization and bar group I can be. And even when I did that, it wasn't enough. I had to, be part of the administrative structure, the managing structure, because I like to give. I like to give back. I
Mm,
like to help. I try to involve myself to make a difference. And so when I experience on the other side, I guess, a lack of drive from someone,
mm,
or a lack of interest, a lack of any intellectual curiosity to know, to want to get involved, even though I think even in my own perception, they may have it an easier road than I have. I find it hard to understand why they're not motivated to do more, because you can always do
mm,
more. So I guess
yeah.
I guess that my background has brought that out in me, that intolerance for, um, people who just take the easy way out of things, who don't really try their best, who don't really, um, give their all. Yes, because I did it, I feel as though anybody could be able to do it, and it's sort of heartbreaking when people take the path of least resistance. Yes, that's you could call that a pet peeve.
Hmm.
Does that make sense?
It completely does, and I'm thinking as you are explaining it, it's almost like you have your own bar, and it's almost like you can sense one's potential, and there's at
Yes.
least, and maybe, and there's almost a sense of frustration, like I know you can do better. And it's and I know what you mean. I know what you mean. It's almost like a curse a little bit, because I personally have high expectations of myself, and sometimes when I encounter people who do like to take those shortcuts, I'm annoyed.
Mhm. Yes, yes,
And
it is an
yeah, yeah,
annoyance. You're right, it is an
yeah,
annoyance. I don't translate that to parenting, though. I am not that, I'm not mommy dearest. I am not that way with my children. I'm talking about in my professional life.
yes, yes.
It is an annoyance for me when I see that people, even in customer service, or,
Oh,
the just anybody you run into life, it just that when people just take the path of least resistance and they don't look to inform themselves, it just bothers me, I guess.
yeah. No, and you're right, and it's easier. It's the easiest, I would say, era right now where we have information at our fingertips, so everything is right there. And I'm with you. I'm with you. So actually, we'll segue to the last question. What would be your advice then to incoming attorneys?
As probably you're not surprised by this answer, I think that it is incredibly important to immerse yourself in the experience and in all facets of the experience that is available to you.
Mm,
And that includes not just taking CLEs to help you learn the areas that are, maybe you could strengthen or bolster a little bit, but also involve yourself in bar groups, trying to network, face to face, not just rely on social media or rely on
Yes.
LinkedIn, because to me, that interpersonal connection is invaluable in someone's professional growth and development. I really do believe that. To this day, some of my best friends in the arena of our professional practice are connections that I made as a result of my associations with both the local bar association and the state bar. Friends that I will have and carry with me for a lifetime. I think that making those interpersonal connections are really important to someone's personal growth and development, as well as their professional advancement.
Yeah, that's priceless. You're right, and you can't really read of someone's energy and get the same virtually. I mean, we have become and becoming a virtual world to a degree that's great and convenient, but you cannot deepen those connections. Cannot, I believe, and I see the difference that it's very different. So um I agree.
It's a good
Attending and
yeah,
participating. Yeah,
it's a good
yeah.
supplement, but it shouldn't be a replacement.
Right. That's it. That's it. Exactly. It's a tool, but it should not replace that the connection, the contact. Oh, Rosalia, it has been such a pleasure having you today and really sharing your amazing story of resilience, kindness, passion. It just you really are an inspiration. And thank you so much for sharing yourself
Thank
with
you,
us today.
Denisa. Thank you. It was really a pleasure. Thank you.
And for those of you who would like to know more about Rosalia and how to get a hold of her, make sure that you click on her bio link below. And do not forget to subscribe to our podcast channel, Beyond the Bar. And also follow us on all social media channels. Until next time, stay curious and stay inspired.